times to study these. But he was trying to give them ideas and raise them up from a very low standard of living.
So let's get back a bit to his life. So we have him now probably in his 20s. And did he get a court appointment, or what happened with that?
To make a long story short, Queen Elizabeth never really wanted to acknowledge him or raise him up. And his life doesn't really become more well known in public until James took the throne after Queen Elizabeth, because she kept him in the background and kept him pretty quiet and under her purse strings. So a lot of times you'll read about the history of Francis Bacon, and it was an early birth, and then all of a sudden when he's in his late 30s or 40s, now he's starting to write and become well known. And again, I say, what's he doing all that other time? And to this brilliant scientist who could speak all these languages and write and expand our vocabulary, what was he doing for 20 years? And did he just one day wake up and say, I'm going to share this with the world? Mm-hmm. Or was he writing secretly and giving a whole history? All the time he was growing up, he's writing these codes, telling about what was really going on, but he couldn't expose it.
Now let's get back a bit to, you said he had a brother. What was the brother's name again? Was it Robert?
Robert Devereux, second son 5 years later. Again, the Virgin Queen, pregnant. And if you look at the state papers at the time, you'll see that she disappears for a few months on end, and there's no correspondence, and she's hidden away, and that's a clue, okay? So he deeply loved his brother. And it turns out to be a very sad ending with this story with the brother, because his brother got hungry for power, especially after he found out that he was also royalty and wanted his place. And the Queen put him in his place.
And from what I read in the Shakespeare Code, it seems that Essex, he was called Lord of Essex, right? Mm-hmm. Robert Devereux, he was tried for treason. And Sir Francis Bacon was appointed by the Queen to be the legal prosecutor in that case. And what an incredible, I mean, you can't imagine what it would be like to prosecute your own brother when, if he's found guilty, he'll be put to death. But Sir Francis Bacon had to go through that.
If psychologists ever wanted to study his life, it would be quite a study and research method, because he was commanded by the Queen with the threat of the loss of his life to prosecute his brother. And he tried to play it very low key and play a minor role, but she kept forcing his hand, and she would rewrite what he really wrote down and said, and made it a lot more condemnatory. And he also never thought his brother would be put to death. She thought that the Queen would pardon him. And there's a whole story of the hidden ring that we can get into, but bottom line is his brother did lose his life, and a lot of people never forgave Francis Bacon and condemned him, not knowing that he was commanded by the Queen.
So when you look at his life, there's just such amazing challenges, and we think about Saint Germain, now the Ascended Master, and all the challenges he went through in that life, and he made a lot of good decisions how to react to events and how not to become bitter or angry or withdraw, but somehow rose above all the events.
It's utterly amazing. And, if somebody repeatedly tried to keep you under their boot, or were revengeful and were trying to undermine you and put you to death from the time you were basically a kid, which Robert Cecil did, who was a very wealthy and well-known and high-placed adversary, between him and a lawyer named Koch, who pretty much undid his public name. For him not to be revengeful and to strike back and try to get his just desserts, as they say, is a test that many of us, I don't think, would pass. Mm-hmm. And to continually try to keep focused on raising mankind up and sharing his wisdom and knowledge and ethics and morals, and not get sidetracked by all the people that threw things in his path, is a story of victory. And
so when Elizabeth I died, that would be a great opportunity for him now to become Francis I of England.
I guess it would be if you didn't have a lot of people who wanted to see you dead, who were jealous of you, who didn't want you in power. Also, at that time, he was not as much in the inner circle because he was starting to develop more and more of his inner writings, philosophies. He was becoming more involved in writing his outer works that we know about through history today. And it would have caused a lot of political and religious turmoil again if this would have been opened up. So at that time, he chose to go to more of the inner life than trying to pursue the temporal crown. Although it was his right, and he was actually the closest in line. And of course, Mr. Cecil had something to do with that.
So this is, as you said, a long-time enemy was Robert Cecil. And so when Elizabeth I passed on, then the crown went to James I of, well, it was the Scottish king, became James I of England and Scotland, I suppose, and Wales, and Ireland. So what sort of man was James I?
Not very well liked, except for the few. He did not have strong moral character. He saw himself as very educated and open-minded, which he had a surface education, but he was a very questionable, to say the least, moral character. He had some very unsavory habits that people even today would have a very hard time swallowing. But him and Robert Cecil were in cahoots. Cecil had contacted him even before the Queen had died. Cecil also, from the codes we find out, strangled the Queen to shorten her end so that he could get James I into power and secure his position, which he continued on, became wealthier and wealthier, and ended up leaving the earth just as rotten as when he was younger.
So did Robert Cecil have a position of power under James I?
Oh yeah, he was basically a right-hand man.
Really?
And he spent his entire life warning him about Francis Bacon and how Francis Bacon wanted to take the throne. And James partially listened to him, but he also knew the brilliancy of Francis Bacon. And he needed to have him there to support him because he did not know how to rule.
And so one of the biggest tests of Sir Francis Bacon's life was when he was the Lord Chancellor, I believe, under James I, and then he was accused of bribery, and then he admitted to bribery. But actually the codes reveal another side of that story.
Again, commanded by the king to take the fall for his favorite, Buckingham, and the king, who had used a system of bribery, payment plans, basically making wealth off of being corrupt. And they did not want to be exposed, so they used Francis Bacon as the fall guy and commanded him to plead guilty when he absolutely could have defended himself and got his freedom.
So he died, I think, so-called died around about 1626. And I think we'll probably have to have another show with you again, Lawrence, to talk a bit more about Sir Francis Bacon and his legacy, because there's so much we haven't touched. I mean, Sir Francis Bacon was involved in the founding of America, Masonics and Rosicrucianism, and in fact inspired the Constitution, I believe. So there's a lot of more we can talk about. But thank you so much for being with us today, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Well, thank you very much, and if people would go out and get the Shakespeare Code, they'll find it a wonderful mystery story.
Thank you. We've been talking with Lawrence Robin about the Shakespeare Code by Virginia Fellows. I hope you've enjoyed the show. This is Ruth Chester-Jones with Lighten Up Your World. See you next time.